إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. Dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And I pray that the blessings and the mercy and most importantly the peace from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descend upon each and every one of us and our families and our children and their children and those who will come after. I was thinking about this earlier today. You know, in this world we live in this environment we live in which it seems like day in and day out, people are looking for some reason to demonize us as a community, to drag the name of our beautiful faith of Islam through the mud, to drag the name of our beautiful Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the one that we seek to follow and emulate in any way possible, through the mud. Because sometimes all we have to do is look to the very basic aspects of our faith to see how beautiful they are, and to share this with other people. And the very greeting that we give to one another, when we shake hands and we meet and we say Assalamu alaikum, is the most beautiful greeting we can possibly give, because we are praying that Allah have peace upon one another. And this is something we must never forget and be proud of. And when we greet each other with Assalamu alaikum, it should bring joy to our heart and joy to our lives, inshallah. I want to share with you a beautiful hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You will not enter paradise until you believe. I think if each and every one of us took a step back and looked at what our goals are, what our purpose in life is, and we really analyzed ultimately at the end of the day when all is said and done, because there is one thing in life that is absolutely inevitable, and that is none of us will live forever. It has never happened and it never will happen. One day, the life that we live, the time that we have, the breath that we breathe will come to an end. And when that does, all the goals that we seem to have for this life, for the type of degree we want to get, the career we want to have, the car we want to drive, the house we want to buy, how many children we want to have, they will not mean anything at that moment. So when we sit and we think about it, we will be reminded that our ultimate goal and our ultimate desire is that we enter into paradise, that we enter into Jannah, that we would live there for eternity in peace and absolute solace, and that we would finally get a chance and an opportunity to meet our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to exist in the eternal state of bliss. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept us and make Jannah our final resting place, inshallah. So you will not enter paradise until you believe, said the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you will not believe until you love for your brother or sister what you love for yourself. This is a beautiful hadith. This is absolutely stunning. That we have to love for one another what we love for ourselves. And it's not just the simple things that if I have a glass of Coke and my friend is so thirsty, my brother in Islam is so thirsty and they want to drink a cup of Coke, that I give them a cup of Coke. No, we're talking on a much deeper level than that. And in fact, I had a very restricted understanding of these words until I came across an explanation from Imam Nawawi, may Allah be pleased with him, who said that the reference to brother and sister in this hadith is not just brother and sister in Islam, but it is your brother and sister in humanity. Therefore, the words of the Prophet ﷺ should really be understood that you will not enter paradise until you believe, and you will not believe until you love one another. And that means each and every other in humanity. And indeed, this is the way of our Prophet ﷺ. When he started, there was no other Muslims. And if he did not have this deep and overflowing love for humanity and for his fellow human being, there is no way Islam would have spread the way it did. But it was out of love for his fellow human being that it spread left and right throughout the Arabian Peninsula, all the way to Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I want to share with you a story of a friend of mine who's an imam, and he's short, literally. He's not even taller than this minbar right here. And he travels around the country and he speaks to large groups of people. And one time he gave a talk, and a young woman took another young woman in her arm and was leading her up to him. And by the way they were walking, he could tell that the one woman being led was blind. And so she came up to him and she thanked him for his talk, and they had a good conversation. And after he responded back to her, she said, "It was such a pleasure to meet you, but for some reason, I always thought you would be taller." She's blind. And he thought to himself, SubhanAllah, am I that short that even a blind woman knows how short I am? And before he could even say anything, she said, "I noticed that your voice was coming from down here instead of from up here." She didn't need eyes to see. She didn't need to have the ability of sight to know that. And the reason I tell you this story is because most of us, have been blessed with clear vision, whether it's through our eyes or through using spectacles like me. Yet, sometimes we fail to see beyond what is right in front of us. And some of us will look at the challenges of the last few years. Some of us will look at the challenges that have brought to us as Americans by the current administration. And we will think that Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hatred and all this other chaos that seems to exist in our country, that seems to be working to rip it apart, would have just started a few years ago. But we have to have the ability to see that the challenges that we as Muslims in America face, and the challenges that so many groups in America face, did not start 3 years ago. They didn't start 20 years ago. But they have a deeply rooted and long history in our country. A few years ago, back in 2015, I took a class at the University of Oklahoma with a man by the name of Dr. George Henderson. You should look up his name. Back in 1968, not too long ago, 1968, he was the first full-time black professor to be hired at the University of Oklahoma. His family was the first black family in 1968 to purchase a home in Norman, Oklahoma. A town that nowadays, because of the diverse student population, seems like it's pretty progressive. He was part of the civil rights movement intrinsically. He marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He sat at the same table as Malcolm X. He was on the committee that worked to desegregate Little Rock schools. So he not only knew about the civil rights movement, he walked the walk, he talked the talk, he lived it and he breathed it. So I had the opportunity to take his class, and one day he said, "I've told you about my life, ask me anything." And of course, Those of you who know me know that for the last 7 years I've been doing this work with CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. And one of our primary focuses is to protect the rights of Muslims in Oklahoma, to fight back against discrimination, and to fight back against hatred and Islamophobia. So I had to ask him, I said, Dr. Henderson, you live this life. You have seen, supposedly, that black people in America have gained more freedoms. Have things really changed? Because I said, from where I'm sitting, things seem pretty challenging at times. And he said, Adam, I wish I could tell you things are better. But he said, just about that much. He said, the only difference between now and then is that there are consequences if somebody goes and attacks black people. There are consequences if you use certain language. But the problem is that in America, we have not dealt with the deeply embedded problem of racism and white supremacy that caused all these issues and that continue to cause problems. And this was back in 2015. And he said the Islamophobia that you and your community deal with are rooted in the challenges of racism that had existed since this country has been founded. That was a very eye-opening moment for me. And it made me realize that as a community and as people who by default in the world we live in America are categorized as different. I may look white. My mom was white. But my dad is brown. And because of the world we live in, I am not classified as a white person. I am somehow different because I am Muslim, as are we all. But one thing we need to remember is that our faith has a strong tradition of pushing back and challenging racism and the idea that any one race is better or has some kind of supremacy over another. And you say, Adam, where did you find this? In one place in particular that I go to time and time again. That in some of the final words that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ spoke to mankind, he said very clearly that as Muslims we have to stand against racism. I will read to you a beautiful excerpt from the final sermon of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, O people, listen to me in earnest, worship God. Perform your 5 daily prayers. Fast during the month of Ramadan and give your financial obligation of your wealth. Perform Hajj if you can afford to. All mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, a white has no superiority over a black, nor a black has any superiority over a white, except by piety and good actions, which, by the way, piety and good actions cannot be judged by us. That is left to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he continued, learn that every Muslim is a brother to every Muslim and that the Muslims constitute one brotherhood. Nothing shall be legitimate to a Muslim which belongs to a fellow Muslim unless it was given freely and willingly. Do not therefore do injustice to yourselves. These beautiful words of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they may have been spoken 1400 plus years ago, but they have indeed withstood the test of time. And perhaps in 2019, in the United States of America, in Oklahoma, these words are more meaningful and more impactful than they ever were. Because right now in America, we have a problem. Let me share with you, if you've not read before, one of the greatest Muslim Americans to ever live, our brother Al-Hajj Malik Al-Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X, may Allah be pleased with him. As you know, he had a very challenging life, and he lived in a time in which racism was rampant. He lived in a time in which the author, Richard Wright, in his autobiography by the name of Black Boy, wrote that the black man was treated worse in America than a homeless dog. Worse than a homeless dog. Can you imagine that? No matter what we go through, no matter what challenges we go through, no matter what names we are called, we will never know what it's like to be treated worse than an animal, I hope. May Allah protect us and protect our families. But this was the experience, and this was the environment that Brother Malcolm X grew up in. And of course, after going to prison, many of you know the stories, he was attracted to the message of the Nation of Islam because it was empowering for black people. But after a period of time, he realized that that was not the truth. And so he sought the truth, and he found this understanding of what real Islam is. And so he said, I am going to take the pilgrimage. So go and Google for me after this. Sometime today, you must read Letter from Hajj by Malcolm X. And read the words he said. Because he went from an environment in which he was treated worse than an animal, in which he was treated differently only because of the color of his skin. And he went to Mecca. He went in front of the Kaaba. And all of a sudden he was put in a situation in which he's praying shoulder to shoulder, as we do every day, with white people, with blonde hair and blue eyes. People that he thought were the devil. People that he thought could never coexist with him because of the environment that existed in America at the time. He prayed with them. He spoke with them. He ate from the same plate with them. And in his letter from Hajj, he said that America, the United States of America, needs to understand Islam. Why? He said, because Islam holds within it the cure for racism. And I've read that to you in the words from our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Very clear that he forbade us from thinking that just because of the color of our skin, or just because some kind of privilege that we've been given in society, that we should think that we are better than one another. We are only better if we are better in here. We are only better if we are more better and attentive in our prayers and our fasting. But that's not for us to judge. So we have to work together, and we have to work towards the same goal in encouraging one another. And you say, well, Brother Adam, that was beautiful. What else you got? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it clear in the Quran. Very clear that we as people, not only do we have to be against racism, but we have to stand up for what is right and stand up for what is just. And I give you two verses. Chapter 4, verse 58. God commands you people to return things entrusted to you to their rightful owners. And if you judge between people, to do so with justice. God's instructions to you are excellent, for he hears and he sees everything. Chapter 5, verse 8. You who believe, be steadfast in your devotion to God, and bear witness impartially. Do not let hatred of others lead you away from justice, but adhere to justice, for that is closer to awareness of God. Be mindful of God. God is well aware of that which you do. It is clear in the words of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is clear in the words of our Creator, the Creator of all mankind, the Creator who created all the beautiful colors and languages and cultures that we live in. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was also clear that he created us with differences. Why? In the Quran, what does Allah say? Not for us to be divided, not to fight against one another, but that he created us with differences so that we can know one another. So our faith is clear. I want to share with you one last thing before we finish the first part of the khutbah. And this is really a point I hope you take home with you, because this is happening here, 2019, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Some of you may have heard of the term Black Wall Street, Greenwood District. If you're not familiar with it, that's okay. I was not for a long time. We need to educate ourselves on what used to exist here in Tulsa prior to 1921 and why it's important, because we're coming up on 100 years since that part of Tulsa was destroyed. Back in the early 1900s, of course, there was segregation. And of course, black people did not have the same economic opportunities afforded to white people in this country. And so they built a district right here in Tulsa, right off downtown. You can go to the Greenwood Cultural Center and you can learn all about it. You can walk the streets around the baseball stadium in downtown and you can see plaques on the ground where it will say what businesses used to exist there. And of course, there's a John Hope Franklin Reconciliation Park as well. The Black Wall Street district, the Greenwood district, was so successful that they said $1 would stay within the district an estimated 19 months before being spent elsewhere. They were multimillionaires. The most economically successful black district in the entire country. 6 months ago, and that's where I started to learn about this. And that's where I started to realize that as a Muslim in America, as a Muslim who understands that in order to fight back against Islamophobia, in order to fight back against all the hate that we see in society, we have to go to the root of the problem. Not just keep putting bandages on it. And the root of the problem is the racism that this country was built upon. Because the reality is, if you go back 400 some odd years, this country was built on the shoulders of black slaves for white people. And if you don't accept that as a reality, then we will never be able to be part of the solution. But that is the reality before us. On top of that, almost 1 in every 5 slaves brought to America from Africa were Muslim. So keep that in mind. So last year, 6 months ago, or a little bit more, my friend Bashir Jones, the first Muslim city councilman ever elected to Cleveland City Council in Ohio, came to visit. He was here in Tulsa, he was in Oklahoma City. And as we drove from Oklahoma City to Tulsa, he said, I want to go to where Black Wall Street was. And I was shy to admit to him, I really didn't know where that was. I kind of got the idea, so we went to that area. And he said, I want to know more. And I was shy to admit to him that I didn't know more. Thankfully, we ran into a lady there who knew some information and had a good conversation with him. But it was at that moment that I realized that my Oklahoma history class and the last 20 plus years that I have lived in Oklahoma, I have not been taught an important part of our very own history. Because what Brother Bashir told me, he said, as a black man who grew up in America, in Cleveland, Ohio, not anywhere near Oklahoma, my parents and my grandparents used to speak of Black Wall Street as if it was our Disney. How we dream of going to Disney World, people used to dream of coming to Tulsa, Oklahoma to visit the Greenwood District and Black Wall Street because that was a sign that the black man in America could succeed in a racially divided society. So I realized it was incumbent upon me to learn. And I encourage you to learn more because I only have a few minutes. I'm not going to be able to cover everything today. But Black Wall Street and the Greenwood Cultural District became a symbol of black wealth, pride, and unity. It was booming, 35 blocks, square blocks of businesses booming, multimillionaires, which meant a lot more then than it means now because to be a millionaire today is not much, but you're talking back in the early 1900s. But on May 30th, an incident between a black man and a white woman occurred. And from accounts that I've read and listened to, white people in Tulsa did not like this district because to them it was a sign that black people could succeed without our permission. And so when this incident occurred between this black man and this white woman, the white people of Tulsa used it as an excuse to attack. They used to call it the race riots. That's the wrong terminology. It wasn't a riot. It was literally a massacre. When thousands upon thousands of white people stormed into the Greenwood District and they burned the buildings to the ground. They literally flew planes on top of the Greenwood District in downtown Tulsa and they dropped fire and bombs on these buildings and destroyed them. Every single business burnt to the ground. At the minimum, 300 black people killed. 8,000 put in an internment camp. This is part of the history of Tulsa. This is part of the history of this city and this state and this country that is not spoken about enough. Meanwhile, we have somebody sitting in Washington, D.C. that talks about wanting to make America great again. That's not going to happen unless we actually look at the real problems that have existed in this country long before any of us were born. And we realize that as Muslims, we have a duty, as the Prophet ﷺ instructed us, and as Malcolm X emphasized, and as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us in the Quran to uphold justice, we have a duty to fight back against racism. We have a duty to uphold what is right. We have a duty to bring justice and be a part of working towards justice for the people who are wrongly killed and wrongly murdered. I saw on the news, because we're coming up on 100 years of this tragic incident. They're looking for more bodies. They're looking in 3 spots in Tulsa where they say the white people in 1921 took truckloads of dead black people and just dumped them in open graves. And the mayor of this city, who I believe is doing absolutely the right thing, said the least we can do is find out where they're buried. Find out who they are by excavating the graves, running DNA tests, and trying to bring some kind of closing for the families. Dear brothers and sisters, we as Muslims can be part of the solution for the problem of racism in this country. And it has to start, as I began the khutbah, from a place of love. If we want to go to Jannah, if we want to go to paradise, and if we want to live there for eternity, we have to believe. And we won't believe until we love one another. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. Dear brothers and sisters, before I tell you why I'm here, and don't worry, it's not for fundraising. You can relax. I want you to do one thing for me. Besides what I mentioned earlier about having an understanding of how we can be a part of the solution to the problem of racism and knowing what happened at Black Wall Street and the history that exists here in Tulsa, I want you to do one thing for me. We're heading into an election year. You probably already know what that means. It's going to be a tough year next year. I just want to warn you. Every election year for the last, I don't know however many years, haven't been easy for Muslims. Unfortunately, we become the topic of conversation for those running for office, and it's usually not good. But I want you, when you go home today, I want you to look at yourself in the mirror. When nobody else is around, I want you to look at yourself. And I want you to say that I am proud to be a Muslim in America. And tell yourself that you love yourself. Because we have been fed enough hatred. We have been fed enough animosity. The time has come, in fact, the time has passed that we love ourselves. And we must love ourselves so much that we take that love and we start loving each other here in the masjid and in the community. And then we allow that love to multiply amongst one another so we can go out in society and spread that love and that understanding. And heading into next year, we should be proud of who we are. As a Muslim community in America, ready to stand up for what is right, even if we're standing alone. Ready to stand up for what is just, no matter how many people are standing for injustice. Ready to stand up for the truth, no matter how many lies exist around us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy and empower us to do so, inshallah. I'm here, my name is Adam Soltani, and I'm here with CARE Oklahoma, Council on American Islamic Relations, Oklahoma chapter. As I mentioned, we're not here to fundraise. We are here to friend-raise. We are blessed with the opportunity to announce that we have started a partnership with the Islamic Society of Tulsa. We've existed for 13 years. And we have succeeded by your support. And we have served you for 13 years. But one thing we realized is that because our office is in Oklahoma City, we don't see you enough. And I love to see you. Wallahi, I love every moment I get in Tulsa. So thanks to the Shura Council of the Islamic Society of Tulsa for working with us. We have established that once a month we will come to the Islamic Society. Myself, my team, our civil rights director and attorney, our government affairs director, we will come, we will be present to know you, to talk to you, to answer your questions, to help in whatever way you can, because the only way, brothers and sisters, the only way we move forward is together. The only way we succeed is collectively. The Prophet ﷺ, he didn't do it on his own. He did it with a group. And there is no way any of us can bring positive change alone. There is no way any of us can hope that we will succeed alone. But if we want to be successful for ourselves, for our children, for our future, and if we want to protect everything that is right about this country, all the freedoms that we enjoy, the ability to practice our faith the way we should, and to flourish as a Muslim community, we have got to do it together in following the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Oh Allah, accept our prayers, our fasting, our zakat, and hajj for those who are blessed to go. Oh Allah, forgive us for our sins, our mistakes, and our shortcomings. Pardon us, protect us from hellfire, and grant us eternal Jannah. Oh Allah, have mercy upon our parents who raised us in the best way possible and taught us right from wrong. Oh Allah, help us to raise our children in the right way possible and make them good Muslims, better than we ever hope that we can be. Oh Allah, have mercy upon and accept the good deeds of people who have worked to build this masjid and build this community and keep it running in the right direction. Oh Allah, if there's anyone sick, ailing, struggling in Tulsa, in Oklahoma City, in the state or in the country, as a Muslim, please come to their aid, for there is no one who can aid them but you. Oh Allah, there are far too many of our brothers and sisters suffering in so many parts of the world. You are the one who can help them. You are the one who can assist them. Come to their aid, Ya Allah, and alleviate them of their struggles and their suffering. Oh Allah, help us to be a light. Oh Allah, help us to be a light for this world, that everywhere we go, we spread light and goodness to those we come in contact with. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة